This afternoon we have with us Pat DeFerrari. Pat, as you know, this library has a very rich history, but it's because of patrons like you. And I know that this brief interview couldn't possibly delve into all of your experiences and all that you've been able to do for the town of Secaucus, for the library, and for yourself. So with that, I'd like to ask you. You and your husband are very dedicated volunteers in this community. Since I will interview him shortly, would you provide us with a background of your involvement with the town?
Mine or his or both?
Yours. He can
Mine.
do his own.
He can do his own. Okay. Well, as you know, both of us were, I always say born and raised in Secaucus, and he corrects me because he was actually born in a house on First Street, and I was born in a hospital out of town.
Oh.
So that's
Oh, okay.
differentiates us. But we've been here a long time. And I was always involved in something. Community theater, certainly since I was a kid. Joe became an active member of one of the local banks when it started here. He was the treasurer. And started, the Junior Chamber of Commerce was on the original founding group there. When we had our son, he coached, was always involved with, and he used to play basketball himself. And then, of course, he got involved with David Malka, and they started the SCORE organization, and they're still doing that, and I'm sure you're going to talk to him about that.
Right.
Okay. I was involved with PTA with you.
Right.
I was on the town council with your husband.
Awesome.
Right? And one of the things that I always prided myself in as being the first woman elected to the town council was when we inspected the firehouses, and the library was connected to the firehouse at that point. The ladies' rooms got inspected for the first time.
Wow.
Because there was a lady on the town council.
Isn't that something?
It is something. And when I started the Woods Committee, which was women's organization opposed to the decimation of Smith's Woods, always was an environmentalist at heart, just something that was in me, and tried to keep the town pool from taking down all the trees that needed to come down. I was not successful. The pool is successful, but the trees are gone. Okay?
Well, thank God you preserved Schmidt's Woods there.
We
We love
preserved
that
some
place.
of it. We did. We preserved some of it. We were successful in that respect. And CAST got started. CAST, which stands for Community Art Scholarship Theater, got started because all of the other theaters had stopped. It was no longer community theater. The church lost their director. The priest was moved out of town. And the high school had decided that they just couldn't afford it. So those 3 avenues were closed. So I called up Joan Kashuba, a long-time friend of mine, and we decided we would at least attempt to start a community theater group. So she called a friend on the Board of Education, and I called the mayor, at that time was Paul Amico. And in those days, both bodies had what they called a recreation department. So there was budgets under those headings.
Yes.
And they agreed to sponsor us. Both bodies agreed to sponsor us. So that's why we were able to get started. Where the library comes in is we needed an office space. We needed Xerox machines. We needed a piano.
Oh yes, that old piano.
All of that. And that the library was attached to the firehouse.
Yes.
It had moved from the original library, which we can talk about in a moment. And I don't know that we could have functioned as long as we had, because that was in the 80s. Now we're talking about 2014, so
right.
It's been a long time. And we just had nothing but cooperation from everybody.
Well, I think everybody was delighted to be involved with CAST.
Yeah.
It was such a wonderful function for the community.
Yeah.
So it was a joy to be in partnership that way.
Partnership, and talk about an ongoing partnership. November 8th or 9th, whatever the first Sunday in November is, CAST is producing a day here at the library.
Yes.
In cooperation with the library. We're doing it in the Panasonic room. It's all the songs of Johnny Mercer.
Oh,
So
you'll have standing room only.
We'll have, I hope, we'll have standing room. He's a friend of mine. He's a church musician. He plays over in the Episcopal Church for the Quimby Church.
Okay.
The Quimby Church uses the Episcopal Church. And he's really a great guy. And sent me the video. I sent it to Jen and I sent it to Louise Whitberg.
Right.
And we're all happy with it, so we're going to do it.
Good. I was
We're
delighted
going
to
do
hear
it.
that.
Yeah. It's the first time that kind of collaboration is going to happen between CAST and the library. Okay?
That's great.
Yeah.
And I know that when we were in the library firehouse building at Plaza Center,
Right.
Margaret Grazioli was director.
Yes, yes.
And she was just thrilled that CAST was coming
Yes,
to be part of this town and welcomed you in as, and you worked under tough situations over there.
Well, sure, but that
It
was
was
okay.
tight, but
That
it worked.
was okay. It was when, and I'm going to give you a lot of credit for this, it was when people started using the library for more than books.
True. Yeah, true.
The story hour started, and I used to drop my son off and run to the Acme for a half hour or whatever, and run across the street again. Got to sit in the back room with all the mothers. That
Right,
was very,
right.
very helpful. And the piano was there, and I remember, I don't know if you'll remember this story. A good friend of mine called me one day and said, "Do you know a good typist?" And I said, "Yes, you." She had been secretary for years. So she said, "Oh, I need a good typewriter." I said, "Oh, call Kathy down at the library." And that solved that problem. But nobody in those days was thinking of the library.
No, they weren't. It was
Yes.
a quiet little well-kept secret in town.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Where you could, everybody knew about going to get a book. And then you
Exactly.
brought it home.
Right.
But they didn't know. Now,
The
that's
services.
all. People come to use your computers all the time.
Right, right. So
Yeah,
we
here.
just outgrew that. But just as an aside, that piano that you used
Mhm,
downstairs was donated to the library when it opened in 1957 from the Women's Club, which is
Okay.
now defunct. But
Yeah.
so
yeah.
many wonderful people worked on the Women's Club. So
And
you
did
know.
they start the annual sale that you have, the library has?
The mini
sale,
fair.
The mini fair. Didn't the Women's Club start that?
The Women's Club was the first one to have a mini fair.
Right.
And in fact, I had to make a decision. Do I want to continue and try and get the Women's Club back?
Mm,
Or then I became director and I knew I wanted a Friends of the Library.
mm.
So we did it and changed it to the mini fair and book sale. So it's a replica of the original mini
Original.
fair and then we just enhanced it
You
somewhat,
certainly
you
did.
know.
Quadrupled. And you called me when you wanted to start the Friends of the Library and asked me to be on your steering committee.
You were the very first phone call I made.
Really?
I needed a cross-section of respected
Okay.
members of the community.
Thank you.
My first phone call was Pat Ferrari.
There you go. You got Joan.
And my
Kashuba
second
now
was
for
Joan
that. I was gonna
Kashuba.
say, 'cause Joan and Cass and I are,
Oh,
you can't separate us.
but that was an experience.
Yeah.
We
oh,
needed to do
yeah.
bylaws, constitution,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I'm good at all that aspect. And then I just don't go to monthly meetings anymore. I'm meetinged out, so I just don't do it. But I'm very happy to help if somebody calls and said, we need this and we need that, and then I
Well,
can do it.
I've already told Jen that you volunteered, and I don't know if you're going to remember, you volunteered that if we could ever get a coffee
Oh, yes.
room here
Yes,
at the library,
yes, yes.
you'll chair that committee.
Absolutely.
So
I
I-
certainly will.
We'll hold you to that because you never know what she has in mind. so.
Certainly will. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I do, in fact, go to many libraries when I'm in other areas.
Right, I know you're a great traveler.
I love to go to libraries. Joe does too, and more than I do. He finds them, and then he says, "This is a good one." And my daughter and my granddaughter hang out in libraries. That's what they do. And there is a lovely big library in Salt Lake City, which is where my daughter lives, and they have a great coffee area.
Right.
It's fabulous.
Right.
They sell pieces, little quiche and little things, nothing big. And there's the coffee, and it's a great meeting area where people can congregate and just have a discussion, have a cup of coffee, and go on their way. So it really is fabulous. And I always thought, since you've got Dunkin' Donuts within walking distance, this could just be an annex. I mean, they could just do it.
Well, it was in my plans, but I ran out of time.
Yes, yeah.
And I have
yeah.
to say that Jen has to get, still, she's been working hard changing certain things.
I know.
And
Oh, I
the
know.
community has changed.
I know.
But someday,
Someday
you
we'll
might
do
be
that. And a
old,
card
and,
room.
an old lady, and we're going to come to you and we're going to
That's
say,
okay.
remember that promise.
That's okay. That's really okay.
What do you think? You mentioned something before. Now you mentioned this big, beautiful library.
Yeah.
But what about the original library?
The original library, I was a kid. I mean, I remember it vaguely. Because you said it moved in 56?
56 was the original opening date. They opened in 57. So,
In
1957 in Plaza
In
Center.
Plaza Center. So I was a teenager.
Right.
And I was already in high school in Weehawken. So-
Another Weehawkenite.
Another Weehawkenite. So the library, the local library, was not all that important to me anymore. It was, of course, when I was from well, we didn't have K, from 1 to 9.
Right.
We were in town, and we did use the library. And when I remember, and of course the school libraries were not like they are today.
No, of course
Nowhere
not.
near
There's
it.
no money.
Right, nowhere near it. But what I remember is going up the spiral staircase, and I'm gonna, the secret is, you know where it's hidden.
I know the secret.
And seeing the big desk, it seemed huge when I was little. And the librarian, Mrs.
Mrs. Dudley.
Dudley, had a pencil that I loved because she could change the date by moving the
Mhm.
thing at the top. And she said, this is the date you picked it up, and this is the date it's due, and don't be late or you get fined.
Right.
I remember it as being all wood, most 90% wood, being dark.
Yes.
It wasn't, the skylight would have done wonders. But the thing I remember the most is the file cards were in drawers that were probably this long.
That's
You
right.
pulled them out, right?
Right.
And we learned how to file and how to file it in 2 different places. It could have been under the name of the book or the name of the author. So that learning experience, put it in 2 different places, was so helpful to me when I was on the town council.
Uh-huh.
Because I would do that. I would put it in 2 different places. And while everybody else is looking through this file, I picked it up out of that file. It works.
Very good. Well, that particular file cabinet is downstairs in the reading room.
Oh, okay.
We do have that. It's the original file cabinet.
Okay, that's
Because
great.
so many people missed the card
Miss it.
catalog.
Sure,
Oh.
sure.
So
Now
we-
you have to use, it's all online. I
Oh,
guess.
it's all
It's
online.
all online. I don't even bother. I just go to Richie's, who, by the way, Richie downstairs, I went to school with. So I go to him and I say, Richie, I need, and then he goes.
he helps
He finds it.
Well, we don't want to put anybody out of a job,
No,
so we
don't
still
wanna
need
put anybody out.
we still need our library
That's
people
exactly
here.
right.
You
That's
know.
exactly right. And Gladys got me involved here. I tutor a
Oh,
nurse.
do you? Oh,
yeah.
welcome to the club.
Yeah, it's fun. She comes from Tibet. She's a registered nurse there, and of course is waiting to get all the documentation or whatever. But here, I'm always so impressed with how smart these people are.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, she reads beautifully, talking about English, and understands all the words. The struggle is getting the pronunciation, but that's
Exactly.
with everybody. That's with everybody. But the first thing I did with her, and of course this is a wonderful place to meet, we went and got the dictionaries,
Mm-hmm.
showed her how to use an American dictionary, and we filled out an application form. So the things
Right.
that I figure she's going to need down the line.
It's
So
a great experience.
It's a great experience, and Gladys is so helpful, never says, no, I can't find that for you. She
Right.
says, give me a minute, and,
Right.
and goes and gets it.
She has amazed me how many people she's gotten, and she pulled me back out of
I pulled you
retirement and
back
said,
out.
"Remember, I started this program. You
Right.
have to come back."
Come back and help. Yeah,
But
that's great.
it's gone on beautifully, and
Yeah.
under Louise it is enhanced now.
Mhm.
With Gladys,
It's going.
it's thriving.
Right.
Because she doesn't take no for an answer.
Answer. That's right.
Which
Well,
is-
either does Louise. By the way, just so you know, Louise does all 90% of the publicity for Cass.
Yes, I'm aware.
Yeah, whenever we are going to do something, I may not talk to Louise for months, and then I'll email her. Okay, we're doing a show, whatever date. And she gets
Right.
back to me. Okay, get me the info.
She's also working behind the scenes on the history, doing typing for
That's
me,
great.
keeping the timelines that I give her, and also
That's great.
she's a great help that
Good for
way.
her.
She really
Is Georgine Gallo a member of the Friends of the
Yes,
Library?
she
I think
is.
she is. All right. Well, Georgine and I grew up together also, and she recently lost a husband.
Yes,
So through Gladys, I bought a book,
right,
which is
In memory.
of
Mhm.
him. Yeah, because that's what I know Georgine would
right. She would love.
appreciate.
Yes, she would.
Yeah. So
Yes,
so that's a great program.
She's an
too.
active member.
Yeah, I know
Yes.
she is. Well, she reads like 4 books at a time.
Right.
Okay.
So you told me about the first library and the
Yes.
second library, and then when we had the grand opening for this
Here.
library,
Right.
it was like heaven to us. There are 69 computers in this library.
Right.
But what do you think the libraries of the future will be like? You've gotten to see a lot. And some people say, oh, with Kindles and whatnot. And I know my friend Fred hates that word, Kindle.
Kindle.
Libraries won't be as important as they were. I disagree strongly. But can you think of anything that you might think for the future for libraries?
I think libraries will always have a place. Whether you're going to read a piece of a newspaper like this, or whether you're going to read it online, is going to be an option, I think.
Right.
But I think there will always be a place for libraries. What comes to my mind, especially, first of all, the entertainment factor, when you can have an opera singer come for an hour on Sunday and introduce opera to
Mhm.
to people who've never heard it before. I mean, you can't even put a price on that.
Right.
But besides, the youth, the kids love coming to the library.
Yes.
They learn so much here, and they learn to love books, to love learning, to love being with each other. I was here, as I mentioned, I was here tutoring my friend, I guess about a month ago. And there was a man in the Panasonic room with live snakes.
Yes.
Okay, I went, wow. Okay. And she had her 2 nieces and nephews with her. They were visiting for the summer. And they couldn't wait to get in there.
Sure.
They couldn't wait to get in there. Now, there isn't a computer in the world that is going to replace that.
That's exactly right.
That face-to-face, one-on-one, I can touch the snake. Okay? If that's what you
Or
want
a
to do.
storyteller,
Or
or
a
a
storyteller.
play, or
Right.
whatever. So,
Right.
well, now we come to this part of the program where I say, what would you like to say? I asked you questions. What would you leave us with? What thought, anything you want that would add to a little piece of history of the library?
Add to the history of the library
Or,
the future?
or just the future, whichever way
The
you want
future.
it to
I would
be.
like to see libraries get bigger and bigger.
I agree.
I mean, I remember when this was being built, we thought, we'll never fill it. Well, here we are. What
Well,
is it, 10 years?
That wasn't me. I was fighting like crazy
I
to
know.
be bigger.
I know.
I know we don't have
I know.
the museum, we don't have a history
Right.
room,
Oh,
we
that
don't
would
have a
be
music
wonderful.
room, but
The
we're
library-
grateful for what we got.
The library in Florida is at least 7 stories.
Right.
It has a small, wonderful theater, one of the better theater in the ground level. I used it so much when I was on the town council. One level was just law books. That's That's all
Sure.
it was. The
I could
whole
see that.
level was just law books, and you weren't allowed to take them out. You had to stay there, but that was
Yes.
okay. I looked up a lot of those books in those days, and they had a wonderful coffee shop.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here she goes.
Here I go again. Well, because if you're going to spend hours,
Sure.
it was a nice little break. You go get a cup of coffee and a whatever, a little bit of something, and you go back to
Right.
whatever you were doing.
Well, I agree with you. I'd like to see it get bigger. They told me that we can add to this building.
Okay,
So
fine.
let's
Going
say
up or
someday-
out or whatever.
going
Okay,
up.
Going up.
So we will see if they need it in the future or what the
Right.
future brings,
Right.
what Jennifer has in mind for us
Sure,
as
sure.
the times change. So
Sure.
thank you for
That's great.
sharing
Thank you. This is
a
great.
little bit of yourself with us. I know yourself is a much larger incorporation into the town and into your
Okay.
family.
The
But
library.
we appreciate your time. We really, really
Very
do.
welcome. The library's done more for me than I've done for it.
Oh, we'll leave you with that thought. Thank you, Pat.